Why June 19th? And before you start in the comment section and start calling me a racist, hear me out. Why June 19th? Why not August 18th or June 2nd? August 18th was when the 19th Amendment was ratified, giving women the right to vote. June 2nd was the day that Native Americans were given full U.S. citizenship. In fact, June 2nd, 1924 was when that happened, which means that the 100-year anniversary of that is coming up next year. But there's nothing about that. Stores don't close on the 2nd of June. Post offices don't close on the 18th of August. So why June 19th? What makes that day so special? And the fact that I have to ask that is a sign that these rights movements that pushed for this day have actually achieved the opposite of what they wanted. Instead of creating unity, they have caused division. And the problem with movements like this is that it's so easy for them to fall victim to what I call the backlash effect. Now, the backlash effect essentially is where every movement, of course, has radicals. We all know this. But some movements are more susceptible to the outcry from that than others. Black Lives movements are more susceptible. Vegan movements are more susceptible. And back in the day, even women's rights movements were, and actually to an extent still are, more susceptible to backlash from that. Because every time the radicals act out, it makes the whole movement look bad in a way that makes it very difficult for them to recover from that. A prime example of that is actually vegans. There is a reason that they have that stereotype about them, and they have all these memes and all of that. It's because of the radical vegans. They are a prime example of what happens when the backlash effect goes full force. But at the same time, these movements don't really do a lot to dispel these notions that come up about them. A lot of these movements are what I would call reactive, which means that if someone during a protest breaks a window or draws graffiti on the wall or something like that, which is still going on in Portland today, if someone does that, these movements are very quick to say, oh, they're not affiliated with us. Half the time they are. And then the other half of the time, these movements are secretly supporting these people. So it comes across as fake because it is fake. And that's the problem. That these movements need to realize that just being reactive isn't going to help their case anymore. We have gotten to an era, a media age, where it's better for a movement to be proactive about sifting out the radicals than reactive. And there's many ways to do that. But the thing about radicals is they give you a lot of warning signs that they're gonna do something radical. They're somehow maybe more aggressive in their speeches during meetings. They're the ones who are always posting on social media. They use very strong language, etc. You can see that very clearly before you ever put these people out into the field. You can see long before what they're going to be like. And you need to shut that down before they get there. Don't let them go out in the field, or better yet, just expel them from the organization altogether before they ever do anything, and make an announcement of something to the effect of, this person does not meet our standards, does not meet our goals, does not align with our methods, etc. And just make it very clear, that this person is a radical and we don't welcome radicals. Let the radicals go off and form their own group and do their own thing away from yours. And make it very clear before they do anything that they're not affiliated with you. Because that's the only way you're going to fix this. Every time these people do something bad, it comes back to bite the rest of them, and it comes back to bite the rest of them hard. And in some areas, it's almost impossible to recover from that. At this point, after the events of the last 2 years in Portland, I would have to say that Portland's tolerance level for radicalism has gone down by about half because of the actions of some of these groups and some of these people. We have had businesses that have been here for literally 100 years be forced to close up shop for good. And to emphasize just how big a deal that is, these are businesses that have survived 2 world wars, a massive economic depression, and they're going out of business because some radical right idiots are throwing bricks through the windows, looting their stores, and drawing graffiti on the walls. This is why people hate movements. This is why people band against movements and form counter movements to them. Because radicals mess everything up. This is why I do not support movements like Black Lives Matter or vegans, for that matter. I've been a very vocal anti-vegan for many years. I keep quiet for the most part about any movement that has to do with people of color because I'm afraid it'll brand me as a racist. I'm not a racist. I believe in equality in the workplace and in the government and everywhere else. I do. But I can't support these movements as long as they are consistently contributing to these problems. They need to understand that they are causing these problems. They are part of the problem. They're not giving us solutions. They're causing problems. When are they going to understand that? It's so frustrating sometimes. It really is. And I'm not here to call out the movements as a whole. I'm here to call out the individuals in the movements that these movements do not shut down when they really should. And it depends on the movement. For Black Lives Matter, it's and vegans and trans, it really seems to be the TikTok influencers as of late. People watch these influencers and they think that everyone in the movement is like this and everyone's a crazy radical and we should not listen to them. We should form counter movements to that, etc. When in reality, a lot of the people in these movements are actually very nice, very normal people. The problem is that these faces of the movements are the crazy radicals, and that needs to change. It's the only way things are going to get done. It's the only way the system's going to change. Is once the face of these movements changes to something that is more familiar and more welcoming. Because that's when people are going to stop fighting each other and stop fighting over how to fight each other. Because when they do that, guess what happens? The system stagnates. I've always been the firm believer that, and history can back me up on this, that over time, the generational moralities change to the point that the system itself starts to evolve on its own. And it doesn't need influence necessarily to start changing on its own. It'll do it whether we try and push it along or not. Also, these movements, by pushing the system, which in itself is not a bad thing, but at this point, there are so many of them that they've actually overpushed. They've overstepped. And when that happens, you have a lot of pushback. There is a balancing line that you have to take between pushing the system along to help it and then pushing it to the point that the brakes go on. And once you have that happen, the system stagnates. Because then you have people who are rallying against these movements to counter movements, and then you have people within the movements and the counter movements alike arguing and fighting about what's the best way to push forward or push against. And in the meantime, in this quagmire, the system just goes, it stagnates. It completely stagnates. It doesn't move forward. It doesn't move backwards. doesn't budge. And that defeats the whole purpose of these movements in the first place. So I think really in conclusion at this point is that these movements need to back off. They need to shut down these radical influencers for good. They need to distance themselves and really show that they're distancing themselves from the radicals, and take on a very different kind of stance than the one that they've had recently. Instead of being out there on the streets, they need to be in their homes and having small discussions with their family and their community within their own neighborhoods. Because these movements have become so poisoned in the eyes of the public that that's the only way they're going to make any impact. They're going to have to start over. They're going to have to start from scratch. It's a sad reality, but that's the reality. And they brought it on themselves.